If you were to ask me what is one thing that I would recommend everybody do at least once in their life, I would recommend journaling. I began journaling in 2020 in the midst of COVID. Before it actually hit its peak, I remember going to the store and I remember just wanting a place to write things down and keep things. I didn't want a diary, but I just knew that I needed a place to keep my thoughts. And so I got this agenda journal. And it was my first journal and it was gray. And I remember just buying it just because. And then COVID struck and I realized that I had no one to talk to. I was completely isolated. And though I was in a home full of people, more than ever, I felt lonely and I felt isolated. And so I began to write. And as I wrote and I wrote and I wrote, I realized how much of a gift journaling was, and it opened my eyes to so many things. And so here I'm going to tell you the 5 things that 5 years of journaling taught me. The first thing that it taught me was emotional intelligence, and how to regulate my emotions. During that time of COVID, we were bottled up in our houses. We were confined in our houses. We weren't able to go outside. And I feel like that was a perfect analogy of how a lot of us were feeling inside. A lot of people realized that they had mental disorders. A lot of people realized that they were suffering and they had to confront the truth of that suffering. But in writing down every emotion that I felt and every piece of grief that I was going through, it helped me learn how to regulate my emotions. Before I had a journal, I didn't have anybody to talk to. I didn't have anybody to go to speak about these problems that I was having, so I would bottle them inside. And whenever I did that, that would result in outbursts, whether that's of anger, sadness, rage. And I realized that that wasn't a healthy way to express myself. And I also realized that I was mirroring the actions of my parents, of the people who raised me. And I feel like a lot of the times we go blind to seeing stuff like that when we're not fully taking in what's happening around us because things happen so fast. And so whenever I journaled down how I felt, words began to flow out of my pen that I would never say out of my mouth. But it is so important to write down exactly what you feel, because that journal is a safe space for you to communicate your ideas to no one, really. It's just for you. But through doing that, I realized how much I was holding in and how important it was for me to step out of those habits, how important it was for me to lead a different life. And that leads me into the next thing, or the next lesson that journaling taught me. Lesson number 2 was vulnerability. If you're anything like me, I grew up in a house where being vulnerable was seen as being weak. Being vulnerable was seen as something that was out of the ordinary, not something that we do. And it took a long time for me to learn how to be vulnerable and compassionate with myself, and then in turn learn how to be vulnerable and compassionate to other people in public. And at first, I found myself very defensive when I started writing down how I felt. I found that I was holding back some. And I think that was because I believe that what if somebody sees this? Or what if somebody takes this journal and sees how I'm feeling? Or what if the true me gets exposed? But we have to remember that in the pages of these journals it could be your deepest, darkest secret. It could be how your random Tuesday went. But these are the building blocks and the building stones to your healing journey. And so you have to be 100%, right? Because God can't bless and God can't heal the person that you're pretending to be. And so I had to be vulnerable and I had to be real with myself. And so if I felt like completely just raging out, I would write that in my journal. There are some pages when I flip through them that has scribbles all over it, because that's how I felt in that moment. And allowing yourself to feel and allowing yourself to be vulnerable is safe, and it's a good way to channel your emotions, especially because if you do it on paper, you're not going to feel as much of an urge to do it in person. If you let out all your emotions on paper, it feels so much better. There's such a lighter weight on your shoulders when you let that out in a secure space and you close that book, knowing that this is how you feel and that you're the only one that gets to read it. But through doing that, I learned my third lesson. And the third lesson that journaling taught me was actually not a lesson, but rather a revelation. And it revealed to me the traumas that I didn't know about. When I was able to be vulnerable, when I was able to document every part of my day and the things that bothered me and the things that worried me, I had to read those back. And that's such an important thing to do while journaling. Make sure you read the pages back. Because it's in doing that I realized that I was dealing with so much trauma. I was dealing with so much grief. And I learned that grief and that loss and that trauma wasn't going to go away on its own. It wasn't going to magically mend or heal itself. It was something that needed to be uprooted. It was a wound that needed to be opened and taken care of properly. And I only figured that out once I started journaling and reading past and seeing all the hurt and seeing all the pain. It isn't normal and it isn't right for humans to harbor so much anger, to harbor so much resentment to the point where it leaks into and affects every part of our lives. And so journaling taught me that I have a lot of trauma to deal with. And it was actually the thing that revealed to me that I had to change my environment. When I was going to university or picking a university that I was going to go to, I was originally going to do something close to home. But journaling revealed to me that I had to go away from home, far away from home. And it taught me that I needed distance and a new environment in order to heal and in order to assess everything that I've been through. Because we cannot heal in the same place that hurt us. And that leads me to my fourth lesson, which is to learn to trust God. That is the hardest thing by far that journaling has taught me how to do, and it's something that's still ongoing. It's still a process, because I had to trust that with every day that went by that I wrote in those pages, that things were going to change, that my situation was going to change for the better, that I was no longer going to be in this sad and lowly place. I had to trust that there was a plan for my life, and it was a better plan than what I was in at the moment. And that was super hard because it was going by day by day by day by day. Now, some people might choose to journal once every week, once every 2 weeks, but I think the most effective way to journal is to journal every single day. But the last thing that journaling taught me was the power of speaking life. Because I had to journal every single day, I had to go through the process. I had to put up those building blocks. It wasn't instant gratification. It wasn't level 1 to level 100. I had to watch myself progress and watch myself grow and watch God move the pieces around in my life for my good and for His glory. And I realized the shift in my language. I went from speaking negatively. I went from speaking death over my life. I went from saying I can never, I will never, what if, to I can, God has done, praising Him in advance. And it's not a jump that happens overnight. It is something that you have to build on. Every single day you have to decide that there's more for your life. Every single day you have to decide that you're not going to give up on yourself. And the only way that I made it to my promised land, and the only way that I reached a breakthrough, was because I decided that I couldn't continue to allow myself to stay in that lowly place, and that I had to trust. But the real change physically happened when I switched the way that I spoke to myself mentally. We always talk about positive affirmations, and I wouldn't even say that it's about positive affirmations, but it's just about switching that day-to-day language that you have. I can't take this. I can't do this. I'm so sick and tired of. It's small things like that that keep us bound in those cycles of thinking that things will never work out for us. It's small things like that that keep us stuck into the cycle of thinking that our lives are worse than everybody else's around us. And so when we read back those pages that we've journaled in, we can see those patterns, we can catch those patterns, and every day make an intentional choice to do something different.